So be like, there's bugs in my water. How'd that happen?
Good protein.
All right, yeah, just a little thicker is all. All good. All right, so I'll show you a little funny story. So I attended a really exciting class on Monday and Tuesday up in Bend. Advanced Group Crisis Stress Management class. It was actually very good, but that's some heavy stuff. But anyway, so I had to be in Bend at the State Patrol office at 8 a.m., which meant I had to get up kind of early and get dressed in the dark. So I get to class on Monday morning, we're doing class introductions, and I'm about the last one, because I was smart, I sat in the back. And I'm sitting there, and I'm just listening to people, you know, and I'm looking down at my shoes. And on my right foot, I have my winter hiking boot like I'm wearing today. And on my left foot was my summer hiking boot. They looked very different. They felt about the same, so I didn't notice when I left the house. But we all had a good laugh for 2 days about my hiking boots. And then Wednesday and Thursday was such nice weather. I actually took the motorcycle out of the garage and rode around Sun River a little bit, which I don't recommend riding around the traffic circles in Sun River this time of year because they put tons of sand out there and it's very slippery. But it was beautiful, so I just putted around and, you know, met a friend for coffee and, you know, did that for 2 days and now look at it. We're sitting in Gordy's last night. My parents invited us to go have dinner at Gordy's. And sitting there and we just finished our dinner and visiting with somebody else in the restaurant that I knew. And I look out the window and oh no. You know, horizontal snow at about 30 miles an hour. It's like, oh, this is not good, right? Reminds me of being in the Dakotas or Wyoming, where I used to hunt in Wyoming. Dad and I hunted in Wyoming several times, and there was always weird weather. So this is why we don't live in those places, right? Okay, so it's only temporary. It'll go away. The sun is shining, and the wind is very cold. So take care of yourself, cover your skin, all that good stuff. All right. One other thing on the mailboxes in the back. All right. If you are the type of person who used to, or maybe still does, give out little Valentine's cards. Remember, we used to do this in elementary school. Make the little pouch thing and hang it on our desk, you know, and get the cards. I don't want anybody to feel like that one kid in your class that never got cards from anybody, because there was always that one kid, right? That everybody's like, I won't give them a card. They're gross, right? So if you're going to bring cards, like on Valentine's Day, make sure everybody gets one. Okay? This is going to be socialist card time. If one person gets a card, everybody gets a card. Alright, as close to socialism as I want to get, other than fishing or hunting, because we always share with our hunting and fishing partners. Okay. Alright. Enough of the fun, right? Alright, I'm going to have a little fun with God's Word too. I hope we have some fun, because I learn better if I'm having fun. Right? If learning is always like, oh, right, then, you know, pretty soon I fall asleep. So, all right. So I'm going to ask you this is going to be a definition question. I just want you to think about it for a minute. What does this word mean? What does the word apostle mean? All right. The word apostle, A-P-O-S-T-L-E. And what is the function of an apostle? Think about that for a minute. Because it can be kind of confusing, right? We talk about the 12 apostles, but sometimes they're the 12 disciples, and like, well, what made them an apostle? Right? Okay. So let's go through some definitions. We're going to go back to Greek. I don't want to be a Greek snob because I don't read Greek in the Greek language. I have to look at the English transliteration and attempt to pronounce it. All right? If you show me a bunch of Greek letters, I'm going to be like, it's Greek to me, right? You know. Or same thing with Hebrew. I'm like, I don't know what it says. I'm not that smart of a Bible student. I barely passed English classes in high school, let alone taking another language. And I took Spanish for, I think, 2 years, and I think my teacher just passed me because I would bring chips and salsa. I'm serious. She had an assignment. I remember this assignment. Her name was Janet Newton was the teacher. She's retired now. She's still alive, so she's out there. Maybe she watches me on Facebook. I don't know. I have no idea. And so we were all supposed to, you know, take turns bringing in some kind of, you know, Mexican dish that we had made. Well, I didn't bother to ask my mom to try to cook enchiladas or something like that. I don't even know if she knew how to cook enchiladas then, right? Maybe you did. So I went to the store. I bought a bag of tortilla chips and a jar of salsa. Like, here we go. That's as far as I can get. Sorry. So My language skills, not that great. Okay. I can read. I can write when I have to. Don't like to, but I can if I use my computer to type, because my printing is so terrible I can't even read that, let alone cursive. All right, so first word we want to look at is the Greek word, I think it's pronounced mathetes. Mathetes or something like that. It's kind of sort of how it's pronounced. That is the Greek word for disciple. All right? What does disciple mean? What is a disciple? Okay, let's take Christ out of it. Let's just, in generic terms, a disciple. There's been disciples of certain politicians, disciples of, famous, musicians, right? Disciples of, famous smart people. A disciple is a learner / follower of someone. It's like a student. If you are studying underneath someone, if you're studying martial arts and you have a sensei, that's like the head guy in your little dojo thing, right? Where you go beat each other up. All right? Then you are a disciple or a student of, the black belt. You come in as the white belt, it means you have no rank. You are then become a disciple of the black belt. So followers of Christ are to be as students. And so if we see the life of not just the 12 disciples, because there was others too, right? The 12 were the close ones, kind of the inner circle. And then you had other disciples. They were followers or learners of Jesus. And so we see Jesus is continually teaching his disciples, continually teaching us. So if you're a follower of Christ, you are, by default, a disciple. Okay? You're a disciple with a small d maybe, but you're a disciple, right? I'm a disciple. All right, that's definition number 1. Definition number 2, the Greek word, this one I can sort of pronounce because it's really close to the English word, is apostolos. Or in English we would call it apostle. What makes an apostle? One who is sent, right? A sent one. Can you be an apostle? Really, can you be an apostle before you're a disciple? I don't think so. Right? You got to learn, right? You have to be a student first. You have to follow, and then a follower can then become a sent one. And the sent one, in the Greek definition, is sent as having the same authority as the sender. Okay? So when, a leader of a country, a president or a king or a queen or whatever, when they send someone to act in their authority, it's like you're an apostle. I'm not saying you're like an apostle of Christ. I'm saying you're acting in that sense of a sent one or an apostle. Okay? Some would call that perhaps an envoy. A similar word, it kind of means almost the same thing, but it's a different word in Greek, meaning the same similar thing to apostolos, is the Greek word presbyo, where we get the word presbyter from, or Presbyterian. All right? I'm not going to pick on the Presbyterian denomination church. Okay? It's a similar word, and it means ambassador. Ambassador. Again, the head of a country, through the State Department, at least in our country, the State Department sends ambassadors to various countries where they live, right, in the ambassador's house, and work in the... Where do they work? Where does an ambassador work? What's the name of the building? An embassy. Okay? Part of that is so that they can then liaison with the leaders of the country they're in, and part of that also is to take care of their own citizens that might happen to be in that country, right? Okay. So they are a presbyo, according to the Greek language. And Paul uses this word in 2 Corinthians and in Ephesians to describe himself and to describe followers of Christ. Okay? So these words are important. Language is important. So the apostle then is one who is sent then by the leader to do the leader's will. So an apostle then is one who is sent by Jesus, right? Under the authority of Jesus, with the power of Jesus, to do what Jesus would do. That's what an apostle is. I want you to open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 10. So this year, actually we started last year, which wasn't that long ago, we are preaching through the book of Matthew. If you're new here, that's how we preach. We don't pick a topic out of the sky like off the news and try to find a couple Bible verses to match that topic and so we can convince you to believe exactly what I believe. What we do is we preach through the Bible. What does it say? What does it mean to us, and how do we apply it? That's called expository preaching. The other one's called topical preaching, and we try not to do that most of the time. Okay? So we are preaching through the book of Matthew, so we're not going to leave anything out. In Matthew chapter 10, which is where we're going to go here in just a second, Jesus is going to take his 12 closest followers. We know them as the disciples. Remember, there's other ones too, right? But these 12 are the ones that they're like his bodyguards almost. They're there, right? They are witnessing things. Some of them become authors of some portion of the New Testament. Not every author of books in the New Testament is considered a disciple or an apostle. Luke being one of them. Okay? Mark being one of them. Certainly Matthew and John, right? And Peter. Paul considers himself an apostle, but an abnormal apostle, right? He wasn't part of that inner group originally. Okay, so Jesus is going to take his 12 closest followers, disciples, and he turns them then from just followers, going around with him and listening to what he has to say and seeing what he does. He takes them from being students, and he then transfers them into this, really a position of being a sent one or an apostle. It happens here in Matthew chapter 10. Luke chapter 6 tells us Jesus prayed all night before selecting the 12 out of the group of disciples he already had. So he prays before making that selection. So I think we could probably assume, the Bible doesn't say it, we don't want to assume too much, but we could probably assume that he also prayed about these men before sending them out. And he probably prays with them too. So prayer must come first. You don't just decide, and I don't just decide that I'm going to be an apostle. I'm going to use that with the letter small a. I'm not going to ever equate myself with the 12 apostles. We don't just decide that. Before we become a sent one, a whole lot of people are going to pray about it first, including myself, right? Before we came into pastoral ministry, and before anybody goes into any kind of church ministry or missionary work, there needs to be a lot of prayer. It's not just on a whim, right? Or a career decision. Because when people looked at me, and I remember when we announced, while I was still working my other job, that we were going into pastoral ministry, some people said, "Hey, yeah, good for you." And some people said, "Why are you giving up all that money?" Right? Why are you taking a 60% pay cut? I'm not sure. Okay? But come to find out, a whole lot of people, my mother included, and a bunch of other ladies in the church have been praying for me to be a pastor for years. It's all their fault, so if you don't like me, blame them. Okay? Jesus prays all night. We see that in Luke chapter 6. We're not going to read that today. Let's go to Matthew chapter 10, verses 1 through 15. Well, I get a sip of water. Okay. And when he had called his 12 disciples to him. So Luke chapter 6, that little portion of him selecting his 12 disciples, that's already happened. They've been with him for a while. And when he had called his 12 disciples to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon, who was called Peter. He always appears first in the list, I think, because he was like the informal leader. Okay? Every group has an informal leader. Someone who may not have rank, but takes charge. Simon, who's called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas, and Matthew, the tax collector, author of this particular book, James, the son of Alphaeus. Now we've got, how many Jameses do we have in the disciples? 2. How many are actually mentioned in the New Testament? Right? James, the brother of Jesus, is not a disciple at this point. He could probably be classified, probably, based on other passages, as potentially an unbeliever for a while. He changes his tune. Alright? So, James, son of Zebedee, James, son of Alphaeus, and Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite. Now this is New King James translation of the word Cananine. So it's not to mean he was a Canaanite like in, Abram's day in Genesis. The word Cananine, again, language is important, means one who is jealous or zealot for someone. So some translations then call him Simon the Zealot. They were we would call them today an extreme right-wing, hardline political faction that wanted to kill all the Romans that ruled Israel at that time and go back to autonomous Israelite rule of the kingdom. Okay? So some might consider him to be a terrorist. Okay? Simon the Canaanite, and look at who else. That guy. Judas Iscariot, who also betrayed him. He was one of the 12 disciples, folks. And guess what? He was included in the 12 who are then given power, the power of Jesus over unclean spirits, to cast them out, to heal all kinds of diseases. Okay? Jesus gives this group power. So now they're going from followers to ones who are being sent by him. And he's going to send them out. What he does, what Jesus does, is he sends them out ahead of him from Israelite town to Israelite town to prepare the people for Jesus to show up. Okay? So these 12, including the betrayer, Jesus gives power to perform miracles, physical and spiritual. His power. That's interesting, isn't it? He even gives his power to the one he knew later on down the line would basically sell his soul for 30 pieces of silver. Now what he doesn't do, he does not send them across the world. He does not say, all right, I'm taking you to the Mediterranean coast and I'm putting you on a boat and I'm sending you to Italy or some other place, right? He doesn't do that. He says, what he's going to do is he's going to send them to the places right there. Okay? He has them start close to their ethnic and religious home. They were not ready to go to Samaria or other, we'll call it Gentile, non-Jewish places. They were not ready. Okay? They're still in the, in the mindset of it's all about the Jews and Jews only, and those other people are despised. They're not ready to move out. Jesus deems them ready to minister close to home. So he has them start close to their ethnic and religious home, to their people, to what Jesus calls the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This is the good shepherd, right? Jesus calls himself the good shepherd. What is a shepherd's job?
Shepherding.
Okay, let's expand on shepherding a little bit. No fair using the same word. Words are important. What is a shepherd's job? Protecting, taking care of the sheep, feeding them, caring for them, keeping the wolves away, or other predators. That's the shepherd's job. Okay? So he looks then at his own people as lost sheep. So if you're a shepherd and you've got 50 sheep, right, and one of them gets lost, now you're down to 49. Now the crummy shepherd goes, I got 49, we're good. I'm not going to go out. I'm too lazy. I'm not going to go out and look for that one. What does a good shepherd do? Make sure the 49 are in a safe place, and he goes and rescues the one. So he's sending them out as rescuers in a way. They are sent by him to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. International missions will come after the martyrdom of Stephen. All right? For right now he says, stay here. And he commands them. Let's read on. See what he tells them. We're going to go verses 5 through 15 today. And he keeps going. But for the sake of time, I'm going to save more for next week. Okay, and a couple weeks after that, and a couple weeks after that. Verse 5. These 12 Jesus sent out and commanded them. He sends them out. He commands them this, saying, do not go into the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter a city of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And, so we've covered that. And as you go, preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Provide neither gold nor silver nor copper in your money belts, nor bag for your journey, nor 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor staffs, for a worker is worthy of his food. Now whatever city or town you enter, inquire who in it is worthy, and stay there till you go out. And when you go into a household, greet it. If the household is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. And whoever will not receive you, nor hear your words, when you depart from that house or city, shake off the dust from your feet. Assuredly I say to you, it will be more tolerable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah, we know what happened to them, in the day of judgment than for that city. All right? So here he's given them the send command. This is what I'm going to have you do. What's the first thing he tells them they're going to do? No. The first thing he says is he's going to preach. That comes first. Not that one thing is more important than the other, but that is the first thing he does. He says, and as you go, preach, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Who's the kingdom of heaven? Or what's the kingdom of heaven? It's Jesus himself, right? He is the kingdom of heaven, of which we are a part of. Preach. I don't consider myself a good preacher. However, that's what I do. I have not had much success in healing the sick. I have 0 success with CPR. So, if you're going to keel over, you might want some help. Okay? I've done it once. That guy died. That was a long time ago, before we had fancy machines like we have here now, right? We have an AED, by the way, hanging on the wall in the fellowship hall. So if that happens to somebody, we might be able to save you before the fire department gets here. Okay? I'm not an exorcist. I don't want to go there, right? That stuff scares me. All right? I have not yet raised the dead. So far, every dead person that I've been next to has stayed that way. Except for one. I thought she was dead. This was years ago. I thought this woman was dead. I found her laying in a parking lot in a city park at like 3 in the morning. She was cold. She wasn't moving. And I thought, uh-oh, it looks like maybe a crime scene here. But I better double check as I'm getting ready to scream for the medics on the radio. And as I bend down, I'm almost ready to touch like her neck or something to try to find a pulse, and she goes, "Ugh," like that and takes a breath. I literally fell over onto my rear end. It scared me to death. She wasn't, I did not resurrect her from the dead. She was just breathing really slow. Thought she was dead. Okay, so I don't have that, all right? But Jesus commands them to preach the kingdom of heaven at hand, which is, of course, Jesus himself, and commands them to heal others, which, without the power of Christ, they could have done any of that. We look at these guys, right? If you look at their history, you got fishermen, commercial fishermen. They're kind of a tough crowd. They're like loggers, right? They're a tough crowd too. Right? You've got tax collectors. Tax collectors generally, they're kind of the accountant types. They can't do this stuff. You got a political hard right winger. You know, his attitude is kill them all, let God sort them out, probably. Simon the Zealot, right? So you have this interesting cast of characters. Jesus commands them to heal others. But he does something else with them. Notice how he sends them out. Well, let me ask this. How do we send out missionaries or missionary pastors today, financially? What do we do? What do we make them do? We make them raise salary support. That's called deputation. Not that you're being deputized. That's different. I've done that before. Okay? Deputation. I had to do that. That's not an easy task, is it? And sometimes, you know, depending on where we as a sending church, if we're sending out a missionary or any other church that's sending out a missionary or a missionary organization, you know, we're asking people to raise a tremendous amount of salary support. Right? Because we don't want to have to worry about them. Okay? How does Jesus say, all right, here's what I want you 12 to do. I want you to go back home. Peter, you're going to go back to Capernaum, right? And we're going to go back to Nazareth and all these other places, and we're going to convince people to finance this operation and then send you out. What does Jesus say? He says, take none of that, right? He tells them for a time, they got to live totally by faith. I'm not saying that raising funds for missions work is bad, because it's not. But he does it different. With these guys, at this particular time, he says, you're going to live by faith. Okay? No fundraising, no monthly paycheck. I'm not sure, personally, if I'm cut out for that kind of mission work, of just go and live totally by faith, and hopefully people will feed you. Not sure if I'm cut out for it. I suppose I'd do it if I had to. I did take a big pay cut when I first moved here, but that was before my retirement kicked in. Now I'm spoiled. Literally. Right? No fundraising, no monthly paycheck. He tells them, he doesn't say it, but this is what he's doing. He's forcing them to learn to live by faith. Now, they haven't been with him their entire lives. What have they done? These guys all had jobs. Somehow, I mean, they made a living. You know, whether it's, you know, selling their fish, right? Or taking a little extra graft on the side in the tax collector's booth. They all made a living somehow. We're not exactly sure how Simon made a living. Maybe he robbed banks and armored cars. That's what real right-wing terrorists in our country do, right? I know he and I and others in this room have dealt with those people before too, okay? No. So now they're taken clear out of their comfort zone. And they are told to live off of hospitality. He tells them to accept whatever hospitality is offered. So that's why, as your pastor, if I come to your house and you hand me half of a pie, I'm obligated to eat it, dear. Right?
So don't offer pies.
No, you offer all the pie you want. I'll eat something. Right? If this has happened to me, like, oh, you're a pastor. I'm like, I can't eat all that. Okay, but you kind of have to. Jesus said, okay, accept whatever hospitality is offered. And the flip side of that is to walk away from whoever or wherever you are rejected. This is itinerant ministry, is what this is. Itinerant. There's another word. I forgot to write the definition down. I looked it up, I forgot to write it down. Who knows what itinerant is? Quick, look it up on your smartphone. Traveling from place to place, right? Kind of living on what you get. Sometimes we see this. You know, there's itinerant music ministry. Well, you'll have, you know, musicians that will travel and they'll just, you know, kind of live on whatever it is they get. They're living by faith, folks. There's itinerant preachers that do that too. In fact, you know, the United States, there's really quite a history of itinerant preaching that happened, you know, west of the Mississippi River, or even east of the Mississippi River for a time in early United States history, of itinerant preachers going into these little pioneer towns, right? With, you know, a Bible in one hand and a gun in the other. Serious. I had a book, I loaned it to somebody, I forget who I loaned it to, and I never got it back. It said, Bible in Pocket, Gun in Hand was the name of the book. All right? You've got it now. Aha, he's got it. It's a great book, right? On the history of itinerant bridging in the United States. But this is, at its core, itinerant ministry. Living by faith. Because really, think about it. We live in 21st century Western, United States. Well, United States anywhere. Even Canada, other places, Western Europe. We have things that we call needs that are not needs. Right? What is it we need to survive? A place to sleep, food and water. Right? Something to wear, because you don't want to freeze to death. Right? So we need some way to stay warm out here, and we need food and water. That's all we need. Everything else is surplus. Okay? Everything else is a luxury. So Jesus is going to send them out there with no luxury. In fact, he tells them, don't take 2 tunics, right? Because the second tunic is like your bedroll. Just wear the one you got. Don't take an extra walking stick. Just go with what you have. Don't go taking, a bunch of money in a bag. Just going to spend it anyway. All right? Accept what is offered to you. And if people say no, they don't want you, don't raise a fuss. Just leave. It's kind of shaking the dust off your feet. It's symbolic of I'm leaving you behind. All right? I shake the dust off my feet when I walk in the house, but that's different. So, in looking at that, let me ask you a question. Does that make your pastor, because we were sent here, right? Does that make your pastor or any other pastor, does that make us an apostle with a capital A? I don't think so. Yet, there are people in our country and in other countries, well-known, pastors and theologians that got their own radio shows and their own podcasts. They might be on TV, and they write lots of books. So that when you walk into their church, the first thing you see is the book rack where you have to pay for them. That drives me crazy. Okay? Who are claiming apostolic authority. They're claiming that they have the same authority as the apostles in the New Testament, some of whom wrote the New Testament. I don't claim that at all, folks. I'm a sub-shepherd. Okay? A hired hand, as Jesus called them at times. Okay? I might be an apostle as in a sent one, but I'm not going to claim capital A apostle. We should note that Paul himself does not address Timothy nor Titus as apostles. Both men who he mentored, who he helped send or place as pastors in other cities in Eastern Europe, does not call them apostles. And when he refers to himself as an apostle, he calls himself as one abnormally born, right? He wasn't part of the 12. But he was made apostle by Jesus himself. Jesus is not, I've been knocked off a motorcycle before, I think by God, to get me as a wake-up call. But that did not make me an apostle, okay? Like, Paul got knocked off his donkey. So Paul does not address other pastors in his writings as apostles, nor do I think we pastors should assume apostolic authority. I think apostolic authority ends with the writers of the New Testament. It ends at the end of Revelation. We don't need any more. We have everything we need. It's right there already in the Bible. Okay? But we are still sent forth by Jesus to proclaim the kingdom is at hand. The 12 disciples that Jesus commissioned into apostles, they went to, let people know the kingdom of heaven was right there in their presence. He was coming to town the next day. Right? They were the advance party. We are proclaiming that the kingdom of heaven is at hand the second time around. We better really be ready. Not just to put out the palm branches, we need to be ready to meet Jesus Christ face to face. Because He came as the gentle shepherd, the good shepherd the first time. What's he coming back as? The Lion of Judah, right? Really is a warrior, in a sense. I think he's coming back like when Joshua was going to scope out Jericho. Remember that? Joshua's going to go on what's called a leader's reconnaissance. He's got his binoculars. He's crawling through the weeds up over the little hill to look at Jericho. Well, he didn't have probably binoculars back then, right? Today he might. Just picture this though. Joshua's crawling through the grass. He's coming up over the top. He's going to look down at Jericho to try to figure out how to plan this battle. And there's this warrior standing, this angelic warrior standing in front of him. Right? And Joshua goes, whose side are you on? Right? Are you an enemy, friend, or foe? Right? What does the Lord, the angel of the Lord say? Either. Right? Scares Joshua. That's the kind of kingdom of heaven that's coming. There is a reckoning day, a reckoning time coming upon this world. And Jesus Christ is the one that's bringing the heat. I know I'm getting all fire and brimstone on you here. Maybe we need that. Our country certainly needs that. Our country's a disaster right now. In so many ways. We need to be ready for that. That is the kingdom that is coming. Jesus will usher in, right, the Great Tribulation. That's up to God. Who's got the keys to Hades and death, according to Revelation? Jesus does. It's not Satan we need to be afraid of. We should be very careful, right, in how we think and we address God. It's not to be taken lightly. And I don't take this apostolic authority thing lightly, as some seem to do. Perhaps then, we pastors could consider ourselves apostle in a lowercase letter A sense. Little apostle, right? We are sent ones, sent to preach Jesus Christ as Lord. Commissioned by Him to make disciples, that's what He told us to do. Right? To make followers, students, learners, not followers of us, not followers of anybody else that's out there that's got their big giant TV show and their private jet and their gargantuan mansion and their really nice hair and makeup. That's the only thing I'm jealous about that one particular person. It's like, man, he's got a nice head of curly hair. He's so pretty. Some of you know who I'm talking about. Always trying to make you feel good about yourself. I'm not here to make you feel good about yourself, folks. Your self-esteem is really not that important to me. You're like, oh, no, I don't care about your self-esteem. I care about your Christ esteem. It doesn't matter to me what you see when you look in your mirror. I don't even want to look in the mirror myself. It's scary sometimes. Like, I got hair. I was like, how do I get hair growing out of my ears? Okay? I don't want to know. I just want it out of there. It's itchy. I care about your spiritual esteem. Where do you stand before God? That's what's important. That's what's eternal. We're commissioned by Him to make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's pretty simple. Village Missions calls it preach the word and love the people. I love you right where you're at, even if you drive me crazy. Hopefully you love your pastor right where he's at, even though I'm driving you crazy. If not, well, I guess I'll get fired someday. It's happened before. Okay? What is an apostle? It's a sent one. Someone who is sent to preach the word. These guys were sent not just to preach the word, but they heal and do all these other miracle things that it's not a gift I've been given, folks. And I'm not going to sit there and say that gift is never given. Because then that would be saying the Holy Spirit can't do it. That's not what I'm saying. I don't have those other healing things. I'll just do what I can do with what God has given me. He's given me a mouth. He's given me a mouth, right? He's given me His Word, and that's what we're here to share. Not filtered, right? Not cleaned up for a 21st century culture, whatever that is. I would like to go back to the 1980s and pretend that that decade was perfect, which it wasn't, right? But I can pretend it was. I'd love to go back 40 years and go, oh yeah, let me do this now. I wasn't prepared, but guess what? Just like the disciples, I was not prepared to do what I'm doing now back in the 1980s or the 1990s or the 2000s. God was preparing me for that time as a recalcitrant disciple at times. Look up that word, recalcitrant. It's a good one. Jesus was preparing them, the 12, through that early part of His ministry until He knew they were ready to go to their people, right, and say, be prepared, here He comes. He did not send them to Samaria. He did not send them to Syria. He didn't send them to Egypt or any other place. For a time, He kept them in-house. And then moved them out. They did not start out as apostles. It took training. Right? I need training. Just like this class I took this week, as boring as it sounds, it wasn't bad actually. Sometimes I need those skills in helping people manage, groups of people managing a major crisis. Guess what? We've had mega fires fairly close to us, right? Like burned down whole towns. That was only 2.5 years ago, wasn't it? Right? Labor Day fires, burned out whole towns. Going west of the Cascades. Stuff happens, right? We've had an Airlink helicopter that crashed in Christmas Valley last summer with a patient on the ground ready to get into the helicopter, and it went from 1 patient to 5 instantly, right? I had to go help with, the crisis the mental aspect of that. And there will be other things that happen. So I need training and we need training. That's why we're here. Is to train and prepare so that when we are sent, we're ready to go. Right? Wherever you're sent. You might be sent to Bi-Mart, folks. Mm-hmm. Did you ever think of Bi-Mart, Ace Hardware, any of the grocery stores, the post office, that is the cultural center of town, by the way, as a mission field? You ever think about that? That you might say a kind word to someone who really, even somebody working in these places, who really needs it. Or a waiter or a waitress in a restaurant. I read this quote, now I can't remember who I quoted it, so I'm going to paraphrase it, and it's not my original idea. A person who is kind to you, but is not kind to the waiter or the waitress, is not a kind person. Right? I don't remember who that quote, I read it and then I forgot who the quote came from. Sorry, whoever you were. What a great thing, right? Everywhere we go is in a mission field. We are here to preach and to prepare you to go into that mission field. Your place of business, whatever it is, for those of you who are in business for yourselves or work for someone, is a mission field. We are to make disciples, learners, followers of Christ. Baptizing them. That's what Jesus commands at the end of Matthew when we get there. And when somebody rejects, don't call them names. Don't get into an argument. Don't get into a fist fight for Jesus. Right? You never would have done that. Just move on to the next person. That person that rejects may change their mind later. You don't know. Probably won't change your mind if you pop them in the nose. So don't do that. Be a disciple. Be prepared to be an apostle. A small a. Be willing and ready to go wherever God sends you at any time. That's how he works. Let's pray. Father, we thank you again for this day. And I just thank you for each one here. We have guests here today. We thank you for them too. Thank you mostly for your Son, Jesus Christ. He is our King. He is also our Good Shepherd, who when we're going astray goes out and gets us and brings us back. And loves us enough to die for us. We thank you that he didn't stay dead, but he rose from the dead, conquered the grave, and he's preparing a place for us. In Jesus' name, amen.